Using Illustrator for print design is fairly common. I want to talk about how to set up a document for print, whether it be a full 8.5-11 page or an area within the document itself. So first we're going to go up to File, we're going to say New. I'm going to start off with a full 8.5-11 document, and I want to talk about bleed area. And that's the settings down here, and most commonly it'll be set to 0, and you probably won't notice this feature at all. So you're going to have to, name the document. We can keep the profile as custom. The size we want to have letter, and that's 8.5-11. We want the orientation to be vertical, not horizontal. And then what I will set up is the bleed area. That's an area defined on the page, on the outside of the page, that allows you to move the image off the page. So when the piece of paper gets trimmed, when it's printed on the press, full color press, and it gets trimmed, if the image is intended to bleed off the page, when it gets trimmed, you won't see any peekaboos or white lines down the edge of the page. We want to make sure that the color model is CMYK. The rest of these settings you can leave as is. We're going to click OK. Here's this white area is the 8.5-11 piece of paper. Notice that the red marks on the outside, that's the bleed area. So when we place images onto the page, we can have it extended off the page into this bleed area. And like I said, when it gets trimmed, you won't see any random edges if they make a mistake on the trimming. So, a couple ways to approach this. If you're intending this entire 8.5-11 page to be the design, you will want to have the bleed areas defined on the outside. If you're using this 8.5-11 page as a document itself, and your intention is to have a design within here, specific size, you can go up to Object and you can actually insert trim marks that would give an indication so you can have it trimmed within here. Now I want to show a couple of things before we get that setting. To place images on here, a couple of different ways we can do it. We can take an image and just drag it onto the piece of paper, depending on how big that image is, and you let go of the mouse. Obviously, this is a large image, way too big for the page. We'd have to resize this down. Might take a few steps to resize this. There's an easier way of doing that, especially when you're dealing with designs for a specific size or orientation. We want to go up to the word File, select Place. That brings up the box here. We're going to select the image, and that was my Belfast cottage. We're going to click the word Place. The icon changes. It gives a little preview of what the image is, and it allows us to select and drag how big the image is going to be within the layout. That way it's automatically resized. There's no need for resizing the image. That's exactly what we wanted. That's exactly what's going to happen. If we were to place this again, this is a bleed area. If you want it to bleed off the page when they trim it, you're not going to see any random white spots. If you have it right up to the edge of the page, and they happen to make a mistake trimming, you might see a little white mark down here. That's why it's always advantageous if your images in a design are intended to bleed off, indicate the bleed marks rather. So that's one way of placing the image onto the page. This is a raster graphic. It's actually fairly large. I want to place another, if I can find it here. This is a logo that we're going to place on the page. And this is a raster graphic. It's made up of pixels. If we zoom in on this document, you can start to see the pixels. If you were to resize this image, this logo, to be any larger and you actually printed it, you might be able to see the pixels. That would be a bad thing. The image resolution is not proper, and depending on how large you have that, it might take away from the design. You want to make sure everything is crisp as possible. That way, if this, like this image here is much bigger than the page document itself, the chances of you seeing any pixelation from the image is very low. It depends on the image. It depends on the resolution that you have. But this logo here is relatively small. What we can do is we can convert this into a vector graphic. So I'm going to have the image selected here. And notice when you select it, it gives you the option up here, image trace. So if we select that, it's actually going to convert it to a vector graphic. Notice that it got rid of the colors. The default setting is one color, black and white. That's it. So I'm going to undo here, and I want to show you how to address if you're going to change a logo into a vector shape with colors. We click the arrow, and we can define how many colors we want to have converted into a vector shape. I'm going to select 6. Then we can select the expand button. Now it's a vector shape. If we zoom in, notice that we can keep zooming in and it's not going to have any, we're not going to see any pixels at all. Because now these are individual shapes. And we can alter them. We can zoom out here for a little bit. Click off of it. And if we select it, there we go. We can alter the path. We can actually change the shape of the design because it's a vector shape. Each one of these is a different element, so we can modify it from there if we wanted to. If not, we could just leave it as, but it's still a vector shape. So that's the difference between raster graphics and vector graphics. That's how we set up a page for a printing job. It's CMYK with bleed marks. If we were to just use this design here, this is the design we wanted to have on the press itself, not dealing with any of this other area, we can delete it. But if we just select this logo, and that's what we want to design for, and then send off to our print service, we can go up to Object and we can actually insert trim marks. And that option is create trim marks. What that does is now it gives the bindery department an indication when you print it on the press, you're going to have these trim marks defined. It gives the bindery an indication of where you're going to trim it just for this piece of this logo right here, for maybe a sticker or something. So that's how to set up a design on a piece of paper. Obviously, you wouldn't have that image there. You would just have this design here. Save that Illustrator file, send it off to the print service, and they can go from there. It's already defined in CMYK color model. It already has your trim marks on it. It's a vector shape, so it's going to be nice and crisp when they're printed on the press. So those are some considerations on how to use Adobe Illustrator for print layout.